just generally through the research. I mean, the whole my witch is complete fantasy and not really based on any religion. And
Yeah.
I do have a bit of a go at religion in it, but mainly that I think, you know.
Most religions you have a bit of a go at. It all just comes down to try to be decent to people for a change.
Exactly. And yeah, I think just respect other people's religions, you know. It's people should be allowed to believe in whatever they want to believe in.
Yeah, you know, the great big flying purple people eater is
Yeah.
actually there is the Church of the Flying Purple People Eater.
Oh, really?
Some people set it up as a gag.
And it took off.
Oh yeah. Well, you know, there's also there's the Church of Elvis.
Okay.
Which is registered in some of the states, and I think that some of these guys who dress up as Elvis and do wedding ceremonies are canonized through that.
Oh, really?
It's you got to have a giggle.
Yeah.
If you can't laugh at something, you take it too seriously.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean the witch world is actually inspired by my daughter, actually, because she's. I came up with this idea of a witch that's in the body of a 5-year-old. She's a teenager, so she's kind of frustrated by a physicality mentally and a physicality physically. And I'm actually in my daughter's room at the moment. That's why I'm surrounded by dresses and stuff, because I had to lock the kids out. Otherwise, they would just be asking questions all the time.
Yeah, so I fully anticipate that my cat is going to come in the middle of this interview and decide that the litter box must be used, which is directly behind me in my study. So.
Oh, we have sound and vision, but luckily not smell, so we'll be all right with it.
Yeah, so if I start grimacing for some strange reason, you probably know why.
Okay. And what are you working on, Stephen?
Oh, I read a variety of things. Right now I'm working on it's a sequel to another book, Horn of the Kraken, The Mistletoe Spear, which is a Norse fantasy Viking adventure.
Okay.
And basically, the mistletoe spear in Norse mythology was used by Loki to kill the god Balder.
Okay.
And I've extrapolated from that Odin was so infuriated when he pulled the spear out of his son. He threw it, and it ended up landing in Midgard.
Okay.
Our Earth.
All right.
So a group of human heroes have to find the spear and take it, because it is a weapon that whoever possesses it basically can win any battle.
Okay.
So that's the quest for this spear, and the Crusaders are trying to take over England, and they have to run afoul of them. And the Athelstan, the historical king who invaded England and took over southern England, has made deals with trolls that are being used as mercenaries, but he's cheating the trolls because he's made counterfeit money, and he's using that to pay them. And so it all gets into things that actually happened in that 900s time period.
Okay, really?
Because the war, Athelstan did conquer what was then Wessex, the southern England, and had aims of conquering the rest of the country. He also had the backing of the Roman Church in doing this because he was Christian.
Okay.
And Jarl Eric Bloodaxe, who was nominally the rightful king of Norwich, was one of his greatest competitors. So there was an actual historical conflict that I've used as the foundation to build the story.
Okay. So yeah, it sounds like you had to do a lot of research before you started writing for this one.
Well, with the Horn of the Kraken and Mistletoe Spear, I had a lot of the research done for him because it was commissioned by the Fate of the Norns Ragnarok gaming people to write the books.
Okay.
So I had their gaming manuals, and their gaming manuals, if you pick them up, they basically have a huge historical section.
Right.
So I was able to draw a lot of the history from that, And also, I was in the Society for Creative Anachronism for about 9 years, and had, while I was Celtic persona, I had a lot of people who were friends that were Norse. So I was already quite steeped in it, and I just happened to be a mythology buff as well. So
Yeah.
it was kind of a good match when I got that contract.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Yeah.
But the book's out already, or it's or you still
Horn of the Kraken is out.
Okay.
Mistletoe Spear is about 90% done in rough draft. I just have to write the conclusionary battle,
Yeah.
and then the epilogue.
But it's a series then, a series of books, or
it's going to be
right. Okay.
It's going to be. I have 4 books. I have a clear concept for 4 books.
Okay.
And there may be more after that. There may not. It all depends on how the contract goes with Fate of the Norns.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, well. Just keep writing, I guess, and
yeah. But I tend to. I prefer writing a series if the world lends itself to it.
Yeah.
It's once you've brought the characters to life, they're easier to write.
Yeah.
I mean, well, you must be finding that. You're writing a series yourself.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, I wrote a standalone book first. It's very funny that you say mythology, because I'm right into, this is the other book, the first one. It's called Lawless, and it's about my experiences with Aboriginal people in Australia. And it's got a lot of their mythology. So it was kind of throughout I discovered like Joseph Campbell and all the legends and myths and how they all correlate and basically follow the same rules. And the Aboriginal cultures is also quite the same, you know.
Yeah.
So then, I also have a kind of an interest in, especially in history, but that mythology part of it. So it sort of led me into the witch world, I guess, but not really the mythology part of it. I kind of try to do everything in the book which is not according to mythology.
Oh, are we live?
Yeah. Yep. We're live. Everything's going. Oh. That's all. Everything's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to get everything going, and I'm just about ready to start if you guys would like to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right off the bat, we'll start right off with welcome to Authors Write Aloud with myself, author Richard White, and me on authorrichardwhite.com, on Twitter at rwhiteauthor, and you can find me on Facebook at author Richard White. Today on Authors Write Aloud, we have Stephen B. Pearl and PJ, and I'm going to pronounce this wrong. Say his last name.
That's Whittlesea.
Whittlesea.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's PJ Whittlesea and Stephen B. Pearl today. We're doing a double author event today because, well, as everybody knows, I myself have taken a little hiatus for the last couple of weeks because my EMT exam was this past Thursday. I passed. I am now officially an EMT once again. So about 12 days from now, I will have my certificate and my new EMT card. And busy. But enough about me. Me later at the end of the show and where you can find my books. But for now, we're going to take things on over to Stephen B. Pearl. And we're going to talk about his books, his writings, and a bit like me, dwells in a few different genres, but much different from mine. But we're going to go with him, start with him, and introduce him, and have him share his books and stuff like that. Stephen, go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Stephen B. Pearl, obviously, the nice intro. And I write across several genres. I have a post-apocalyptic action-adventure series, science fiction. That's my Tinker series of books. I have a paranormal action-adventure, which is Nuki Kubai, and is going to be turned into a series eventually. I also have a Norse fantasy Viking adventure, which is okay. Sounds like there's some growling going on. There's a Norse. I also have a Norse fantasy Viking adventure, which Horn of the Kraken. Okay, yeah, which is Horn of the Kraken. And that's going to be a series as well. I'm currently working on the sequel to that, The Mistletoe Spear. And I have a paranormal romance, which, well, I'm wearing the t-shirt, literally. I got the t-shirt, which is set in England, the Derbyshire Hills area. And the nice bit of trivia with that is the main town that it's in, Bakewell, was actually my wife's hometown. So I've been around that place quite a lot. And I often use real-life settings. For Tinker's Plague, I used the Guelph area of Ontario. A little town called Eden Mills features very prominently. And this is my shout out to Eden Mills. I just fell in love with the village. It's a beautiful little place. If you're ever in the area, stop by. Makes for a very pleasant couple of hours. And the Tinker's Sea is set along the shoreline of Lake Huron. I also have Nuki Kubai, which is set in Toronto, Hamilton, St. Catharines, and Niagara Falls, what we call the Golden Horseshoe up here. Oh, by the way, I am Canadian. A. Got to get the A in there. National Badge of Honor. So, where was I? Let's see. Oh, War of the Worlds 2030, which is set in the California area and is a homage to the H.G. Wells original. There it is. And anything that I've missed, I'm sure will crawl up as we continue to talk. The main reason I like to use real settings if at all possible, because I think they add something. On top of that, I'm notoriously lazy, and it means that all my map building is done for me already. For the Tinker books, I have an old road map that I have marked up with highlighters as to where the advanced civilizations are and the areas that don't have electricity are. And that becomes the foundation for my world. Oh, by the way, in the Tinker world, fossil fuels have been no longer a viable energy resource, so the high-tech societies have centered on the old hydroelectric plants, and there's two of them, NovaGAN, United Grid Regions. The NovaGANs have their Tinker program where they send doctors of general applied technologies, Tinkers, from Tinkerer, out into the Darklands to help them bootstrap themselves back to energy abundance through the use of wind, solar, wave, all the sustainables. Well, in Tinker's Plague, a Tinker comes to the town of Guelph, only to discover that a couple of farmers have stumbled across an old bio research facility, gone in it to loot it, and accidentally brought out a plague. And the Tinker has to deal. Meanwhile, the two high-tech societies are fighting a Cold War, and they're fighting a Cold War battle over the quarantine zone and how much aid to give into it. In Tinker's Sea, a Tinker is tasked with hunting down a notorious pirate that is marauding over Lake Huron in a decrepit nuclear submarine, leaving a trail of radiation and death in their wake. And these are all set about 100 years after the generators stopped turning. So I can use the real-life locations and address a lot of environmental issues. In Tinker's Plague, one of the main things that I wanted to address was the idea that we are leaving these pockets of living organisms, bacteria, viruses, etc., that if we do undergo a societological collapse, if our technology goes retrograde, they're still going to be there. Other factors are with global warming and the melting of the ice caps, bacteria that have not been seen for 10,000 years are being released back into the biosphere. And we don't have really any resistance to these. Plague is potentially a major factor in the next few years. And of course, add to that the fact that we can now genetically re-engineer life forms and creating new and more virulent strains of viruses and bacteria. Those are other things that we need to really examine. Yes, a fun, cheery topic for Saturday morning. Let's do the kids' cartoon. On a somewhat more, well, actually, the Tinker books are optimistic, really, because, well, there are these problems, and I don't candy coat them. I also always have somebody who's working to deal with it. They may be underqualified, they may be undersupplied, but somebody is always working to make the world better. As opposed to some things I've come across where it was just sort of, let us sit and tear our hair out and bemoan how bad things are without taking any action. Which I personally believe in empowerment, and I think action is a pretty cool thing to take. On a more optimistic note, I have my my novel Worlds Apart, which is a love story, but it's also a action adventure story, and it gets into some of the territory that the next guest is touching on today, in so much as it is a paranormal my book is a paranormal romance, so it's got that paranormal element. And what I do with my book, with Worlds Apart, is I have a wizard from a parallel Earth that has different physical laws, who journeys to our world in a bid to stop a blight that is destroying his own. Here he meets Alcina, a Wiccan priestess, who is involved in a custody battle over her son Timothy against the boy's sire, who left her 8 years before when she was pregnant. Carl, the boy's sire, has the backing of a dangerous religious cult in his attempt to take Tim. Well, Alcina helps Marcus, the wizard from the parallel Earth, and Marcus helps Alcina, but the dangerous cult is not above doing an old-fashioned witch burning if they don't get their way. So a lot of action adventure comes into it through that. And I am fairly well researched into the history of the Burning Times and things that were done. So my publisher basically, who is also very well researched in this area, said, no, you wrote a witch burning. It's basically taken straight from the pages of history, which is partially true in so much as the questions that the individuals are asking were taken from manuscripts during the Burning Times to show the questions that were actually asked. And they're very, very leading, very twisted. It would be, what is the name of your incubus familiar? Not even do you have an incubus familiar, just the assumption that you do, and you have to give its name. Very dark chapter in human history, but also one that I think bears revisiting, because it's all the same sort of things going on. Tolerance is tolerance, and tolerance is intolerance. And there's a lot that can be stated in a fictional format that will slip past people's preconceptions and maybe get them to think. I was doing a reading just a little while back for the Group Hex anthology, which I happen to have a story in, Group Hex Volume 1. Go team. It's by a bunch of us from the Horror Writers Association in Ontario got together, and one of our group formed a little publishing house, and we put out the anthology, and it's got some of the biggest names in Canadian horror. If you want a nice sampler for Canadian horror, it's a good one to pick up. But I recorded the reading, and at the end of it, I actually did a reading from Tinker's Sea. A whole bunch of stuff is going on in the world right now, which dealt with things that were very much precursors to what happened in Nazi Germany. And I had a scene in Tinker's Sea that was inspired by the troops coming into the concentration camps at the end of the war and what they found there, the mass graves and the emaciated people, basically the man's inhumanity to man. So I kind of borrowed from that for my book, and as part of the write-up for that section, which I did the reading on, I said that never again the burning applies to everybody, or it applies to nobody. And on my film, the film excerpt of it, I put a picture of a group of Islamic refugees, and it does. Now, I have no tolerance for an extremist of any stripe. But the whole idea is that you have to cut the extremists away from the rest of the group in order to get a realistic view of the group. And you know, an extremist of any stripe, just not worth the issue of, not worth the trouble of dealing with. And quite frankly, I wish they had less of a voice in this world, and the moderates had a bit more of a voice in this world. Unfortunately, extremists tend to be the ones who are willing to beat the drums and put in huge amounts of effort to be heard. So they tend to drown out the middle of the road. And I am talking a bit about this because part of the reason I do write is that it gives me the opportunity to reach out to people in a way that kind of slips past their defenses, that gets around the idea of I have preconceived notions, and everybody does. But if you can slip past that, you can maybe get somebody to think. Not necessarily change their mind, but just think, and to decide for themselves and to set the preconceived notion aside. My father was an interesting case in so much as when he was a young man, he was considered radical. When he was a middle-aged man, well, early middle-aged, he was considered liberal. When he reached late middle-aged, he was considered conservative. When he was an older man, he was considered a bigot. My father didn't change an opinion in his entire life. The world changed around him. And that's a sad and unfortunate thing, and I think that it's why it's so important to reevaluate and for people to think. And, you know, science fiction and fantasy have a long history of doing this. You look at the original Star Trek, there were episodes that made commentaries about the Vietnam War. It just was an incredible social experiment in media. And I like to think that I've picked up a bit of that torch and I'm carrying it on.
Can I
in particular with the Ting? Sure.
I just wanted to get a couple questions asked. Everything sounds great, and it sounds like to me you're kind of building your books around what you and what you've seen your father experience through life.
A lot, yeah. Well, I think everybody does. a book is to an extent a mirror of the author. You're going to draw from your own life experience, and you're going to put the voices in your head onto the page. I hope other people do that. I'd hate to think that I'm completely whacked out and I'm the only one who has conversations with his characters in this car.
I do it all the time myself.
Yep, great place for scripting.
That's the strange thing about being an author. You have an imaginary friends even in your 40s.
50s, but yeah. Wow. Hey, a lot of the time they're more interesting than people you meet every day. I mean,
yeah, well, at least you're given a right to. You're allowed to have an imaginary friends, you know.
Yes.
What made you want to become a writer in the first place? What made you make that decision and say, you know what, I want to try to write a book. I want to try to put this out there and continue to write. What made you do that?
Well, there are a couple of major factors. One of them was writing saved the life of a very depressed, isolated, and lonely teenage boy. J.R.R. Tolkien gave me my moral center, my moral code, as it were. Frank Herbert taught me how to think, how to analyze. And, oh, well, Homer, Stanley, I could spend H.G. Wells, I could spend the whole day listing authors who really formed the template for the person that I am. So that was one of the elements. I wanted to pass that on. I wanted to distill that down and give it to the next generation. The other one was, well, you can blame a woman. I was dating Joy, the woman who is now my wife, and I wanted to impress her. So I wrote a absolutely abysmal novel with her. It was a fantasy, and she was basically the princess in distress. Yeah, right. Joy could club me like a baby seal. So she basically became the princess in distress, and I wrote this horrible fantasy book. But what it did was show me I could. It also was successful in its core goal, in so much as I'm still married to her, 30 some years later. But it really did show me I could do it, and I found a certain satisfaction in doing it. I mean, really, being a writer is as close to godhood as most people will ever come, because you can restructure the world. You may wave your magic wand and you change the past. Or so yeah, I'm a control freak, and it's a power trip. It's good reason to write.
How long have you been writing, Stephen?
Well,
since your teenage years?
30 years fairly
Okay.
seriously. Yeah.
Wow.
I started, well, like I said, with that horrible book, and it took about 10 to 15 years for me to actually start turning out stuff that I feel was worthy of publication. And then it took me another 10 years before somebody actually accepted one of the books for publication. And since then, I've had 8 novels come out and 4 or 5 anthology entries. I tend to write novels as opposed to short stories, so I do more that route. I'll bet short stories are a better promotional tool.
So are you are you traditionally published and independent publishing, or?
Traditionally published, third party, small presses. Mm-hmm. I'm with Dark Dragon Publishing. That's where my paranormals are. My science fiction are with Brainlag Publishing. and with Damnation Press. My 2 eroticas are with Club Lighthouse Publishing. And who am I forgetting? Oh, yes. I'm with Pendelhaven, Fate of the Norns, Ragnarok, the gaming company, for my Norse fantasy adventures, Horn of the Kraken. They commissioned me to write those books as a tie-in to their gaming universe. And good game, by the way. If anybody's into gaming, you get to use Norse runes instead of dice, and that's actually a very skill-based gaming system. It makes you think.
I just want to jump in too. Can you tell us a little bit about your paranormal or your supernatural world? Is it realistic? Realistic.
What I did. Okay. What I did with Nuki Cook. Oh, I'm sorry, you're breaking up a bit.
A world that is realistic, or is it something you've made up entirely on your own?
What I do for a magic system is usually, because I've studied Western esoteric philosophy, pagan philosophy mostly, and magical practices for, 40 years now? So I normally take the real, what would be considered real, and exaggerate the power level. Because you have to exaggerate the power level to make it interesting. Because the honest truth is, I do believe in PSI abilities. I also believe that they are mild enough as to not be particularly demonstrative, and they can help, but they don't do it for you. Let's put it that way. So what I do is exaggerate, and I will work in the philosophies of the Western esoteric system into my books. In Nuki Kubai, I have a segment where the Japanese martial artists who are helping to hunt down the Japanese goblin are talking to my Western wizard, who is also hunting this Japanese goblin that is eating the people of Toronto. And my Western wizard is explaining the difference between psychic phenomena and wizardry, which is basically psychic phenomena utilizes your own personal energy to cause change in accordance with will. Wizardry, you use your own personal energy to create channels that tap into the universal energies and guide them to cause change in accordance with your will. And I talk a little bit about that, and it's based on my philosophies. I also happen to be a archetypist. So in the mistletoe spear, which I'm working on now, I have the sacred mistletoe spear from Norse mythology, which was used by Loki to kill the god Balder. And it's found its way onto Midgard, the earthly realm. But the interesting thing I do with that is, if a Norse pagan looks at the mistletoe spear, they see the mistletoe spear. If a Celtic pagan looks at the mistletoe spear, they see the spear of Lugus, the god Lug. And if a Christian looks at the mistletoe spear, they see the spear of Longinus, the Roman soldier who stabbed Christ. And it basically is all the same archetypal energy, but we clad it in our expectations. So I've brought that forward in the book as a way of saying, you know, we really shouldn't be killing ourselves over religion, killing each other over religion, because ultimately it's just spitting in the face of our own God to disrespect somebody else's. So that was one of the aspects I bring into the book from reality, or what I consider reality. I'm not going to push it on anybody. I know there are a lot of atheists out there, and believe what you want. I'll meet you after. I'll meet you after we both die, and you can buy me a drink because I'm right and you're wrong. Kidding. I'll buy the drinks. So
So with your books, have you ever experienced where you're in the middle of the perfect scene or the perfect chapter, and all of a sudden just came to a complete block, stopped you from anything, any creativity at that point?
not really. When I get into a flow, I get into a flow. Where I will find myself blocked is when I'm coming to it at the end, coming to it at the start of the day, and I'll be trying to write, and my wife has seen me walking around the house just going drivel, 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 because I just can't get anything out. It will not come. But I have a way of beating writer's block that I find incredibly effective. If I can't write, I will edit. If I am so burnt out that I can't write or edit, I will either work on the car, do housework, do some carpentry that I need to get done. I will do some of the chores around the place, because I will do that until writing is less onerous than the chores. And I think a lot of people who get stuck with writer's block, it's because they permit themselves to be stuck. There's always something that needs to be done. And you can do something that you consider onerous. Have that as your fallback. Somebody's got to wash the dishes. Somebody's got to do the vacuuming. So if you can't write, you're doing that. And eventually, at least with me, the brain clicks over and says, you know, writing is more fun than this, so I'm going to go do some writing.
Right. In time, and tell your younger writer self something, what would it be?
Well, again, twofold. If I caught myself before I started, I'd tell myself to run before I got addicted. Okay, that's it. But after I was hooked on writing, I went through a very long period of what I call the "it's my baby and you can't touch it" stage. Don't listen to criticism, and you've got your head so far up your backside that you're not really turning out quality work. And I tell myself to get over myself. Nobody does good work without input, and nobody does good work if they think that what they have is already perfect. You have to really put your ego aside. And by the way, I'm going to give a shout out to Critters at Critique, the online writers group. To anybody who is an aspiring writer, check it out. It is an invaluable resource. This is not the official policy, but it's how it works out. You critique one story for somebody else a week, and you get to put one of your stories up a month that people will critique. And these people... I'm sorry?
What was that again? Critters at Critique?
Critters at Critique. I'm not sure if I can easily find the URL. If you just put in critters and writing in Google, it should pop up.
Okay.
But fantastic online writers group, and they will tear your story apart and throw it back in your lap so you can rebuild it better, stronger, faster than before.
Is it critters.org? Is that it?
I think it's critters.org. That might be it. I really have to compile my URLs into a file so I can put them up easily. But if you just put critters and writing into Google, it should pop up. But excellent resource. And that's what I tell myself, to get over myself and let other people tear my work apart and to put it back together, because that's how you learn. And also critiquing other people's work. You start to see the same mistakes you make in other people's works, and then you can start addressing them in your own. I mean, a big one with me, I overuse okay. I do it in speech as well. One time I was teaching a class, I said okay, and okay 106 times in a half-hour class. Somebody was counting. So what I do with all my work now is, once I've got the rough draft done, I go into my search and replace command, type in OK, and I will remove 90% of the incidences of OK. And then I'll change some of them to good and so forth, depending on which character is speaking. But you learn things like that. That's experience, and you pick it up as you go along.
Absolutely. I find using the Pro Writer's Aid that I found actually on the Brain to Book convention that we did online works fantastic for doing stuff like that. Takes turn of things, and it kind of helps me a lot with putting all those things and fixing my style, and counting how many times I have the word and or the word okay.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
Because it's such a simple word to use. It's the words like that are so simple to use and so simple to throw in there, not just on word count but on conversation, especially in dialogue. And when you throw it all in there and you look and you're like, and it's like interview or something with the word in it like 3 million times. It's like, okay, after a while people are going to lose interest.
Any How I Met Your Mother fans out there? But you owe me 3 shots. But
what was that? The link for that, Richard?
The Pro Writers Aid. Let me look. I have to look it up. I know it's. I think it's just prowritersaid.com. Prowritingaid.com. You can get a pro version of it and own it, which you can embed into. I think it works in the Scrivener, Word, a couple of the other things. I think you can even intertangle it into Google Docs if that's what you use, and a couple other things. But there's also a free version that you can use online, but you can only edit up to 500 words at a time. Yeah, I think it's 500 words. Which, I mean, if that's if you're low budget, you can't afford to purchase the whole software. Doing it 500 words at a time consuming, but it's worth it because I mean it helps with so much. It does spelling, it does grammar, it does style, it does it counts the words for you. Like I said, to tell you how many words you've used in the same 500 words, how many you've used in one sentence, and it does a lot. It looks for plagiarism if you've used like online. Oh God, what am I thinking? The research, and you've actually like dropped some in and then rewritten it, just so that you can, for research, right? For plagiarism, to make sure that you're not, you're good and clear on that stuff. But there's a lot of stuff does to really get into it. I'd have to open it up and go through it chronologically, the things that it did when I finished editing the and here I go with the I actually heard about it in Brain to Book, and I went back through and re-edited what happened to me and republished it through Kindle, just because I realized how many things like that I needed to fix. I was so surprised that I had in there, and I write and I edit and I publish and I proofread, and I pretty much do everything on my own because as of this point in time, I am one of the worst starving authors you've ever seen. Like, I can't afford to pay cross the street. If there was a nickel on the other side of the road, I couldn't afford to cross over and pick it up, kind of thing, which I think we all go through at some point in our writing careers. And but I, so I look for things that will help me along the road, that will get me through temporarily. And like I said, I found this one resourceful, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Anyone.
Yeah, I mean, there's loads of tools out there and loads of groups. And the important thing is to get them and use them. As another thing that I'd like to, if we're doing self-help for authors, check out the science fiction conventions, or the spec fic conventions, as they're now tending to be called. Look for ones that have strong literary streams. Go there and do the literary panels, because there you're going to be able to hear professionals in the field who will talk about various and sundry. Actually, I'll try to find the URL for it and put it up. But I had the experience last year of being on a panel talking about intelligent spacecraft design at the Ad Astra Science Fiction panel. And it was myself and Eric Choi, who is an engineer that worked on the Martian lander, the Pathfinder lander. A lovely woman. I'm horrible with names, and I apologize to you. Her name is listed on the video I took of it, though. Who is a scientific consultant, and she's doctorate of this, that, and doctorate of some form of one of the sciences, but is very up on space travel. And the fellow who recommended the panel, who I believe has a master's degree in aeronautics, I'm something along that line. It was over a year ago. But we did this incredible panel, and we were basically doing Imagineering spacecraft that could be used in science fiction. And we were talking about some of the issues, such as the radiation, and how, yes, you can set up a magnetic shield around your spacecraft, but when you turn the shield off, all those captured radioactive particles come cascading down into your spacecraft and cook you, effectively. But that was just one example. There are loads of writing. Just this year, I wasn't on a panel there, but I did attend one where Robert Sawyer, who is basically the biggest name in Canadian science fiction, was talking about Mars as a science fiction setting, and he was getting into some of the nitty-gritty of writing from his perspective. So these conventions, if you look at the panels before you go, make sure they have a writing stream, make sure the people on the writing stream are actually published, and because sometimes they get a little bit flaky, they're well worth going to. And that's one of the things that Books to Brains was really good for. They got a lot of people who knew what they were talking about, and the panels are very well worth reviewing. Short stories.
Oh, the panels were absolutely wonderful. The things
Yes.
I learned, the things I learned, and I jumped in on a couple of panels that are in genres that I don't particularly write in, just to learn from them. So if I decide to write in those realms, and I joined into the vampires one, whether or not vampires sparkle.
Oh yes, I remember that.
It really was awesome. It was a really good educational tool. And the thing about it is not only do you get into the subjects of those kind of characters or that kind of genre, you also get other, you like you were saying before, the author tools that are out there to help you build those characters, or to help you learn or research that type of character. I learned so much from it, and in fact has got me looking into writing a series based on vampires. In fact, that, and I think I'm going to like it. I'm going a different route, kind of like PJ did with the witchcraft books. Complete different stuff and kind of tossing it off to the side, and I'm writing my own version from the beginning before the what you have read before, Bram Stoker's, and I'm going before that and beyond that.
Okay, so you're going right back to the original Neferatsu.
I'm going back to Greek mythology, actually.
Okay.
So I found it. I've done a lot, and I've done a handful of research on it, and I found, the Greek. I found a couple other different of how the vampire came about, and I find the Greek mythology one of the best. And how I'm actually doing it is I'm spinning it a twist. I'm actually writing it about the original vampire's brother, who becomes a vampire hunter, the oldest and first vampire hunter.
That sounds like it could be
I think it's going to be a lot. Yeah, and then what it is because he's basically a damn, obviously a damn fear, but I'm using it in different terminology because I'm going based on the Greek mythology of what a damn fear is in Greek mythology.
Yeah. You might also like to look up the Dagar of the Norse. You might get some nice inspiration that can come into there, because a lot of the Dagar mythos, they were actually the undead warrior servants of the goddess Hel, who she kicked them out of Niflheim and said, "I got a job for you. You get to go back to Midgard for a while." And since Niflheim was not the most pleasant of places, sort of like Niflheim, basically northern Ontario without the trees. Middle of winter.
Find you online. Why don't we go ahead and share, your websites, where we can find your books, where we can find your blog, where we can contact you if anybody would like to follow you or contact you, email you, all that kind of information for all the listeners out there.
Okie dokie. Well, I posted this up at the top, but I'll repost it here. And that's my website and my Amazon page. And just give me a moment. I'll see if I can. That's really right. Novels to see. Brain light.
I'd like to get my screen right here. We've had issues.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so anyways, you can find StephenPearl.com. You can also find him on Amazon, where all of his books are located. Amazon.com/author/Stephen Pearl. And that's Stephen is with a PH.
Yes.
Mix that up with the V and the PH. I do it constantly. Yeah. And you can also find him on his website, StephenPearl.com. He has, I believe, all of his contact info on there for Facebook and Twitter.
Yes, I do. I'm just trying to find my Facebook. I'm more active on Facebook than Twitter. The short word count always gets to me there.
Without being able to use the little acronyms, Twitter acronyms, I guess is what I would call them. It kind of beats you up with only 140 characters. Found that Twitter can be a very successful tool if it's used right, and you can utilize the hashtags correctly. because it really does draw in an audience. And I've actually, in recent time, with the 2 new books and the relaunch of Pages Full of Memories, have actually found Twitter a better tool than Facebook, actually. And I've actually sold more copies by advertising on Twitter than I ever have on Facebook. So I have run with Twitter, but I have also taken, I've taken quite a bit of time on and researched how to use Twitter and what the right things to say are, and how to be able to say everything I want to say in like 5 words, and then post a link with some hashtags. It really helps. But like I said, it's a whole new thing. You got to learn it. You have to understand how to utilize it.
Yeah, I've used Twitter. I use Twitter, but I have to say I am not as comfortable with it. But to each their own, too. I do agree with you. It does tend to be more effective for just quick blurbs and getting information out there.
Well, I think Twitter is more, you can build up relationships with people that you actually don't know at all. So I think it's, especially in what you say, it's also short snippets. So it's very good as an author tool, I think, because you can reach people that you don't normally reach. I mean, one thing was I had my first book. It was in a bookstore in Amsterdam, on a table with Colston Whitehead, who's like a big author in America. And I could tweet to him, and I said, well, it's an honor to share a table with you, you know. This guy has a really big name. And he tweeted back and said, no, the honor is all mine. So, you know, you can reach out, and I've done that with other sort of very big name authors who use Twitter, and you can just strike up a conversation with somebody like that. Whereas I think Facebook is just, it's too busy. There's too much noise on Facebook. It just
Crazy.
Yeah, well, it could because I know a lot of the people I deal with on Facebook face to face as well, from doing the actual physical cons.
Yeah.
And there's nothing like being one of 4 people in front of an audience of about 50 that to cause bonding on a topic.
Yeah.
So I find that I get a little bit more traction out of that. But again, you do what works for you.
Yeah, but I think they're the two that you have to use as a basis, both Facebook and Twitter. But it depends on you. You have different kinds of communities there.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's all just a matter of being visible.
Yeah.
I do a lot with YouTube as well. You know,
Right.
I have the main thing I do with YouTube is I record the panels I'm on, and then I post them up with some additions and author readings and things. Anything that'll promote is right there front and center. So, and I would love for my channel to get a little bit more traffic. Hi everybody! Check out the URLs for my YouTube videos. Check out my channel. Subscribe, please.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Get on there and check out Stephen's channel. It's actually in the YouTube link below that you're watching. I believe I put all of those links there. Did I get? Let's see. Yes, yes, I did. Stephen's website, Facebook, Amazon, and YouTube are in the information below, as well as our next guest, J Whittlesea. His website, Facebook, Twitter, and books are also both links from books to read, and my information as the host is also there available as well. So, and I've got some stuff coming soon, but I'm not going to tell everybody about it until I get writing. Now that I am finally done with the EMT, these things go to work, because things are going to come huge in September for me. I am promising myself to finish one of my novels and release it on September 11th. I think it's going to get some criticism. I think it's going to get some blowback, but I think it's also going to be successful because of it, in a sense. And I think I may have some positive criticism, but I also may have the negative criticism because of the subject and because of the date I'm releasing it. So, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah. Well, P.T. Barnum said, oh, sorry. P.T. Barnum said, I don't care what you say about me, just spell my name right.
Right?
It's very accurate.
Absolutely. And they say, as an author, sometimes negative criticism, it's still criticism, and you're still getting read, and you're still getting a notice. So it can be a good thing in the long run.
There's no such thing as bad press, huh? So they say.
Yeah. Well, the only review I have ever objected to was one where I read what the person said in the review, and my first reaction was, did they read my book? Because they were saying things that were not even touched on the book. They were making false statements about the book. And it's sort of, how high were you? Honestly. But, that's the only review I have ever objected to. And it was not because it was a low rating. It was because the person did not read, was not talking about my book. I don't know what they were talking about.
They were a little off the hook, huh?
Yeah. They were completely stoned, I would think. That's the only explanation. But, on the topic of interviews, I would like to ask your audience, please, for any author that you read, do a review. Reviews are gold to independent authors. Reviews are gold to small-time authors. And if you can put a few words up on Amazon, it doesn't have to be much. Just a star rating, and I loved it. I thought it was okay, mediocre. I personally don't do things below 3-star reviews because, well, I have read books that I consider that bad. I usually don't finish them. And on top of that, I think if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all. But that said, you can still do a lot of reviews because most of what you read, you're going to have some appreciation of. And reviews are the lifeblood for us. So please, give generously.
I got to agree with that. And not only, and I got to say this, it's tough sometimes. Everybody's life gets in the way, but you can check out not just Amazon, but even Goodreads. Some reviews on the Goodreads on the same title. If you have 5 minutes, when you're not doing anything on a Saturday afternoon, just before you kick on your Netflix, and see your Netflix and chill, or whatever the new terminology is these days, and do a binge watch of 35 episodes. Goodreads for 5 seconds and do the same thing. Goodreads on Amazon, anywhere the book is available. If you have purchased the book on your Nook, like my books are available across the board because of Smashwords. So you can get my books on you can get my books on iTunes under the iBooks section. You can get my books on, oh God, there's so many different little ones that I don't even know where to check them all off. But Kobo, I think you can get them on Kobo and a couple other places. So if you get a chance, and that's where you read the book or the application you used it to read it, please go there and leave that quick review. Whether you liked it, you hated it, whether you want to criticize it. I got to say, one of my best criticisms comes on rodeo days. And I loved the review and I loved the criticism for two things. One, it gave me a chance to explain the way the book was written, because I got a lot of criticism from the time I published that book right up until that comment was stated, and now everybody that has read it since then and since that review has loved the book. That Rodeo Days is a short story book of myself and 10 other rodeo contestants that put a compilation of rodeo stories together of our lives in the rodeo, our lives traveling through the rodeo circuit. Pro bull riders, pro bareback bronc riders, pro team ropers, pro barrel racer, and as well as a couple of promoters that promote rodeo today came in and helped me write a short history in New York, as well as a gentleman that helped create rodeo in New York all the way back into the 50s and 60s that started up with the very first rodeo even in Madison Square Garden. So having all that information, we were able to compile these stories together. And one of the criticisms that had come across on a review was like, the book had a nice storyline, however, the grammar and the speech was absolutely terrible. And I was, at first, when I read that, I was like, oh, I'm going to give you one real bad. Don't pick on my grammar. And I had to sit back and think about it for a second. And I said, you know what, though? With that, because when it comes to 10 rodeo cowboys, we are the authentic thing. We are real rodeo cowboys. We are not going to use perfect grammar, talk in perfect grammar. And that's how I wanted to, the book is written as if we were in a coffee shop or sitting at the edge of the bar, having a beer or having a coffee and swapping rodeo stories, you know, telling our lives and our, you know, spills and thrills, you know, hey, you remember that one bull that, you know, stomped me right into the ground, broke my ribs, put me in the hospital, you know, what the book was able, that's what we wanted the book to do. So when I commented back on the review and thanked her for it, surprised that I even thanked her for such criticism. And I said, this is where I wanted to go with it. I wanted the grammar to be authentic. I didn't want it to be perfect grammar as a book is written. I wanted people to read and see how we truly live, not just make everything what it is and then try to type it in perfect grammar. And since everybody has been able to read that, my comment back to her, everybody has loved it because they're like, yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's written in the grammar set of how we would speak standing behind the rodeo chutes. We would use the word yup and yeah and this, that, and the other. We're not going to have perfect grammar. We're not going to, you know, say things the way they're supposed to be said. We use the slang more than we use any perfect English.
Yeah, well, there's a different set of rules once you put those double quotes on. Sorry, that echoed back really weird. Okay, sorry.
Okay, sorry about that. And I like that. But you know, so what I'm saying is any review is good. Like you said, any review is gold, because you're going to get some of that criticism like that. That is, it may at least produce itself as being negative or a bad review, but in retrospect can either help you fix the problem when you're able to respond to that review, be able to shed some light on why it is that it is, and it may help you in the long run. It may help the book sales. It may help people understand the book better. Well,
I think the basis is really that it'll help you as a writer, because that's what you were saying, you know. and any kind of feedback is great. You know, it's not just about selling books, but you want to improve as a writer. So you need those the opinions of different readers to know if you're hitting the mark or you're not, or you know, and that helps you. It just helps you become better at your craft. And that's more important than anything else.
Absolutely. Before it gets too late, I want to kind of spin gears and jump over to you, PJ.
Yeah.
And kind of talk about some of your stuff, your books, and what you're writing. I've asked Stephen to feel free to stay, as you know, like he said in the beginning of the show, that he actually is identifies as a pagan, and your books happen to be about witchcraft. And yes, you said it spun a different way, but I kind of thought it would be a nice spin to throw Stephen in there, and Stephen said he'd, you know, be more than welcome to stay for a while.
Sure thing.
But I want to go into your books a little bit and what you do. I want to introduce you, you know, and let you introduce yourself and kind of tell everybody what you do and a little bit about your books, and we'll dive into some question and answer and stuff like that. So why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thanks. My name is, well, my author name is J Whittlesea, but you can just call me Paul if you prefer. I started publishing in the middle of last year after writing for a few years. My background is actually as a musician and a singer-songwriter. So I started writing like Stephen in my teens, I guess, but then I was writing poetry and lyrics, and I kind of never really thought that I would actually, you know, I didn't have this aspiration to write a book until I just came to sort of the end of my road as a lyricist and poet, and then I thought, well, maybe I should try to write something bigger. So then about 5 years ago, then I started working on an idea I'd had for a very long time, and it's a story about I'm Australian, and this story is based in Australia, and it's about my experiences with Aboriginal people in Australia. So as a musician, I was trying to make this story into a musical, but it never really came together until I actually decided, okay, well, maybe all the information I'm trying to stuff into a musical is not going to fit. So then that's when I changed my focus and decided to write a book about it. The book is called Lawless, and this is the book. And I started publishing, researching independent publishing about 2 years ago, I guess, and realized that there was a lot of correlation between publishing a book and bringing out music. It's a very similar industry in some way. It works on the same kind of rules. And as I've done music independently, I decided that I will continue to do that, but then I will do it with my books. And it's been reasonably successful. I can't live off it yet, but I'll just stick at it because I've found basically the thing I love to do, and I think it's my future. So getting back to what Richard said, I wrote a book. My second book is about a witch, but it's a slightly different take on the witch world to Stephen's pagan background. I kind of didn't know anything about Wiccans and all that sort of stuff before I started writing it, and it's pure fantasy. And mainly, it's the basis of the story is really a coming of age story about a teenage girl who is a witch and lives in. It's a contemporary story, and she lives in Europe. And as she learns about her special talents, then so does the reader. So I've kind of dived headfirst into fantasy after writing a more literary book. And I'm really enjoying it. So, and I've mapped out a 5-book series for it. So, and the second one is due out in July. It's at my editor's now, and that's the cover behind me. And yeah, that's basically it. So you can find information about me at my website. It's pjwhittlesea.com, and also my books. And what else would I like to say? Yeah, I think what I found the most fantastic thing about becoming a writer was meeting all these other writers, people like both of you, and discovering what a great community it is, and especially that it's because of the internet, I guess, that it's a worldwide community. And yeah, I'm actually, that's been the most fantastic thing of this whole journey, which I started, officially started last year.
I just want to say thank you so much for getting an editor.
Yeah.
There are far too many people who skip that stage, and I think that in general the work suffers for it.
I've learned so much just by, I found a guy in Australia, because the first book was an Australian book, so I needed somebody who had a bit of background in Australia, but it turned out that he's actually an English man living in Australia. But the actual editing process taught me so much about the craft and about what I was doing wrong, and you know, I went in leaps and bounds really through that whole process. So yeah, I totally agree with you. Editing, it might be a bit of a cost, but you can find very good editors out there that are not, you know, they're not too expensive. And yeah, I wanted to make a good product. You know, I want my stories to speak. So I give them the best chance I can. So I also have a designer for the books, and I just, you know, I'm also not that well off, but I think that's an important part of putting it out there, because as soon as your book is out there, it's out there forever. So you should put your best foot forward, I think.
Now, just I'm going to toss out a witch joke. What sound does a witch make on a motorcycle? Vroom, 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 vroom. Vroom, 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 vroom.
That's terrible, man.
It's a hoary old chestnut, but it's...
Well, I actually, in my witch book, I decided no broomsticks. So everything that I'm going against all these things, because I mean, the whole broomstick thing, it doesn't make any sense to me. I mean, first of all, you got to balance on a stick, and then it's moving at a high speed. So you know, how are you going to control something like that?
It actually comes from an old fertility ritual the women would ride a broomstick, the men would ride a pitchfork, and they would jump up in the fields in the spring to show how high they wanted the grain to grow.
Okay.
And it was a ritualistic dance to bring fertility to the land.
Okay, wow.
That's the origin of it. So just thought you might find it interesting.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that before. I knew sort of the medieval thing because it's appeared in a painting.
So I don't know if the your character is Anais or is it Anais?
Anais. Like yeah, it's a French name. I took it from Anais Nin, who's a French poet. And yeah, because I wanted to. Somebody kindly read a chapter from my book for the recent what was it called again? The books conference we did recently.
Brain to Books.
Brain to Books, yeah. And yeah, she unfortunately she didn't have the Anais right, so the book starts with Anais preferred her name because it was slightly different to the name Anna. But the way she read it as Anna didn't. Well, she read it Anna and Anais is the same thing, but never mind. It's good that you clarified that so that other people will understand it.
Let's hear about Anais, the Good Witch, and see what where she dives into the witchcraft, because you say you wrote the books different than what most witchcraft is like. So I'd like to hear a little bit about it, so that we can kind of a little plug on, what the story, without giving the whole story away,
Yeah.
a little about the background of the character and about the witching world in the two books.
Right. Well, the original story, my kids, I have two small children. After I published the first book, they said, well, write us a story. So I sort of came up with this story on a bit of a whim for them, and I wrote one chapter. And then they wanted more, so I kept writing about it. So I based the main character sort of around my daughter. She has a love of purple. I'm actually in her bedroom, and basically every wall except one is painted purple for her. And her middle name is Blue. So I decided that this child witch would not also, like, purple was her favorite color, and so her main goal is to change her last name, which is Blue, to purple. And that was the and that was the so that's what I started with the kid's story. So I wrote one chapter, and she said that was basically that was her drive. But as I got into the story, it got much deeper, and I had to create this whole world around it, because it actually, changing blue to purple is kind of an impossibility, even if you're a witch, I decided. But that's still her kind of a main goal, at least in the first book, and then other magical problems pop up. The story is actually set in modern day, and I set it in Amsterdam because I'm very familiar with the city. And gradually, eventually, she's forced out of the city, so she does make a bit of a grand tour of Europe. But that's in upcoming books. And her main her world is basically I used my daughter again. So she's a 5-year-old, or she's in the body of a 5-year-old, but mentally she's a teenager, or her late teens, and she has a caretaker that looks after her. Because it's a bit difficult to get around as a 5-year-old. Everybody doesn't take you seriously, so that was another part of her character, which is difficult to explain. Yeah, what can I say about it? It's a bit hard not to give away the story too much, I suppose, but that's the basis of the world. And she's thrown into an adventure where she basically has to make her way on her own. And I think it's kind of based a bit around it's a hero's journey in some way. So I've decided that, and the deeper I got into it, the more I had to create this world. And because I wasn't basing it on anything, on mythology, I found it quite difficult to write the second book, because I really had to sit down and work out, okay, well, what is this all about? So in a way, I'm learning as I go along, not only as a writer, but I've never written a series before, so it's also another way of writing instead of a standalone novel. I don't know what your experiences are. You've also written series books as well, Stephen?
Oh, yeah. Hello. Yes, I've the Tinker series, and working on the Mistletoe Spear now, so that'll be that series. And Nuki Kubai is also designed as he spun out into a series.
Right.
But I was going to ask, you say your character starts when she's 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
How do you age her up through the course of the books?
I'm not sure about that yet. I mean, her body is. My premise is that witches age slower than normal people.
Okay.
So it's kind of I guess you could call it a bit of a vampire thing in some way. So she's stuck in this body, but I haven't quite decided yet how long, whether she will actually grow through the series or not. You'll just have to read future books and find that out.
Fair enough.
I think it's a possibility, because I think that's part of her physique is not going to be static. If I'm writing a series, then she will have to grow in some way. She'll have to grow physically as well as mentally. yeah, so I've put a lot of parameters on this character, which presents maybe not problems, but I have to be very creative about how I deal with it.
Is your magic system similar to the Harry Potter one, or is it out of the blue? Or
I'm sort of created. Her magic is kind of based a bit around physical things. About the only magic she really has, the most important magic she has, is a magic book called the Promptuary, which features quite heavily in the second in the series, because it has a supernatural software crash, and that's basically basically her magic wand in a way. So this book can do special things for her, but she also has potions. But my potions are given to her. There is a guy called an apothecary, which is quite a difficult word to pronounce. And he's sort of this, I wouldn't call him a drug dealer, but he's a bit of a chemist, I guess. And he's the one that supplies potions for her. And in the first book, she actually uses a kind of pill to get somebody to do something. So I've tried to connect a physical, real world with the magic.
I'm trying to remember the name of the book, but Incense, Potions, and Brews, I believe it's the name of the book. If you did want to incorporate a little bit of more realistic correspondence, that might be one for you to have a quick look at. It's just lists of things that were traditionally used.
Right.
With modern names. No eye of newt or toad frog. Okay.
Sort of actually stuff you can consume. So this is like a Wiccan book, is it?
It's I wouldn't call it Wiccan. Mystical principles.
Okay. What's it called again?
Incenses, Potions, and Brews.
Okay.
I believe it's put out by Llewellyn Press. And it might have been Scott Cunningham might have been the author. I'm blurry on that. But
okay, well I'll have a look at it. Any help? It's good. Yeah, I'm trying. I found it quite difficult to create a world, a real total fantasy world with it, and so I did also avoid reading certain things like you're saying. And I actually have never read Harry Potter except for the first chapter because I didn't want to influence. I didn't want to influence my writing by, in that way. I guess. Sorry, you were saying.
Well, I was just going to ask Stephen if Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them textbook was not the book I'm supposed to be using.
No, you're supposed to be using a promptuary.
Use what works. I mean, I'm the first to say Harry Potter is the most. It has nothing to do with, real Wicca and so forth. So I never understood the big flap about it. Not bad books. I enjoyed them. What I find refreshing about your book is that she actually has a book that she is learning from.
The book is sort of, at the same time, it's like her instruction manual, but also her magic, her main part of her magic. So it's sort of, she's learning with the book, at some point. So,
any sidekicks or familiars?
Well, the big the big premise in the book is actually that and I think this is I found a very traditional thing associated with witches, is that her main job is to save the dead. My sort of tagline is what's my tagline? I can't even remember it. There is no hell, there is only unfinished business. So her job as a witch, or all witches in my book, is to help the undead, basically, or ghosts, find peace in some way. So, and I've incorporated some famous dead people and some just not so famous dead people. So in the book, so quite often through the story, then she'll come in contact with some very interesting people. So I guess she doesn't have a familiar in any way, like a cat or an animal. She's just busy with a lot of dead people. And I also said, well, basically dead people are walking around everywhere, and the way to identify them is that they don't have a shadow.
You've actually stumbled on some very old lore.
Yeah, that was the really weird thing. Once I'd written it, then I started to study more of this mythology, and it matched with what I was saying, which was a bit weird.
Have you ever thought of doing a script conversion with it?
I'm not a screenwriter, but yeah, I could see it as a script, as a movie. Yeah, I think it would work. Why? Are you a script writer?
I've tried my hand. I wouldn't call myself a script writer. I'll do anything that pays.
Yeah. Well, I said once a week I do this thing called silent writing, where you sit in a group with other writers, and one of the person leading that group is actually a screenwriter. She's Dutch, so she writes for Dutch films. But so that is I do have some kind of contact there, but yeah, I could see it working. Have you got books yourself? Have you tried that avenue with your books?
I tried. Actually, I have a script sitting on my hard drive for Nuki Kubai.
Okay, wow.
And I've written a couple of other scripts that I'm going to have to start trying on the marketing end of it. Well, you know, marketing is the slavering vampire in the corner for all our authors. It sucks up your time. It devours your life.
It's 80% of my time, I think, is spent and 20% writing. You know, I mean, you're trying to discoverability is the hardest thing, I think, as an author.
It's just anything that gets you out there, because obviously there's no point in writing it if no one's going to read it.
No, exactly. So yeah, so I'm hoping. Well, that's why I'm trying a series, because I've read that. Well, I think once people are invested in your world and they want to know more of it, they'll want to read more of it. So, but it's a different way of writing. So I'm also learning as I go along. Because I only have one book out, it did okay when it launched, but now it's sort of sunk into the slush pile. But I think a lot of that happens. It's probably has a lot to do with that I don't have the next book in the series, and people that like reading series will want to see more books there, so they can just keep reading. It's sort of something I don't know if that's been your experience, but it seems to be what happens.
Well, I have found that I've made a lot of sales with Tinker's Sea based on Tinker's Plague.
Right.
You know, they read Tinker's Plague, liked it, and then picked up Tinker's Sea because they knew Tinker's Plague.
Right.
It's all marketing. Cross your fingers.
Yeah.
I mean, I really can think of 1,001 things I'd rather do than marketing. But, well,
yeah.
I'm talking to the choir.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, you did that already. I mean, you said to people about the reviews and how important they are. And you did mention Goodreads as well. And I discovered the other day, actually, one of these, there's a few online stores that actually suck in information from Goodreads. So it's quite important to actually to be on there. And that because that's free and you don't have to actually, it's a lot more open for people to review. Reviews tend to be also a bit, it's different atmosphere than on Amazon, say, because people tend to be, I think, maybe more critical but more honest. because in the real world, there would be very few books that would rate 5-star. So I think.
Yeah, well, you get some people who, I think they're trying to be nice and they just give everybody 5 stars.
Yeah, well, that's nice that they do that.
Yeah, hey, bless them. It brings your rating up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to complain about it, but I think that it is a human phenomena. And then you get some people who are hypercritical.
Yeah.
And they'll never give more than 1-2 stars.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think the stars, mate. Well, I mean, on Amazon, it's important, I guess. But I think the review, what people say in their reviews, are more important.
Yeah. So you say the book occurs your book occurs in Amsterdam?
Yeah, it begins in Amsterdam. So I sort of also made up sort of secret places in Amsterdam. There's a big museum here called the Rijksmuseum. It's it's basically an art museum, but it's huge. It's got not just paintings, but sculpture and it has a fantastic library, which is I think the building is about 100 years old, but the library, it looks like kind of 16th century somehow. It's quite amazing. It's with and I've written there as well. Sometimes I go in there for inspiration. So I decided one of the places in Amsterdam that she goes to is this library, and this library she has to go before a witch court for a reason which I can't disclose at the moment. and I set that in this library. So I have used like real places in Amsterdam.
That's always fun.
Yeah,
I love it when books do that.
Yeah, and sort of turned it around. So yeah, and from there she ends up she actually travels to England. So her promptuary is telling her where to go, basically. So it's her guide and her manual and everything, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And have you written sort of fantasy science fiction in a real world setting?
Oh yeah. Well, the Tinker books are set 200 years in the future,
right,
in southern Ontario.
Okay.
And Nuki Kubai is set Toronto, Hamilton, St. Catharines, and Niagara Falls, which is what we call the Golden Horseshoe over here. It's basically the coastline of Lake Ontario. And Horn of the Kraken is set in England and Northern Europe, as well as Worlds Apart is set in England. So, wherever possible, I use the real world. Space opera, you pretty much have to be out
somewhere else. Yeah.
Somewhere else, yes. Which is actually, I'm working on a space opera now where the lead character, because he's a clone, is banned from ever going to Earth.
Okay.
And so Earth is kind of a non-starter for the whole thing.
Okay. I find it fun. It's quite fun to use like real places, and I'm sort of drawing on where I've traveled as well in this book. So I think earlier you also mentioned, and Richard did the same thing. It's like writing every book is taking a part of you, and you're putting it on the page. It's not some of it. Only you will know what is real fantasy and what is real, what is sort of real experience. And I sort of did that a lot in the first book that I wrote. But this one has moved more into more the places I've been and things that I've experienced, but also.
Have you had the experience of you've written in a real world location?
Yeah.
And then that location changed before the book. Well, either the book was out or before it came out.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. There is it's in connection to this library in this museum. This museum is on a big square, a grass square, and opposite it is this big mansion, and it used to be a place for I think it was an accountancy firm or a lawyer's or something like that. And so I kind of made up this idea that that's where Anae is taken to this house at one stage, and underneath the house is a tunnel which runs from that house and takes her into the museum. The funny thing was that this house got sold, this mansion got sold, and it itself got turned into a museum. And this happened in the last year. So I'd imagined what it was like in this house, and I'd made it into this sort of 18th century, I don't know, huge. Yeah. So she actually goes into the main hall, like the entryway of this house, and it turns out with the staircases and whatever. And then it got turned into, it was no longer a private building, but a museum. So I thought, well, what does it really look like inside? So I went in there. Looked nothing like what I'd envisaged. It was kind of boring, you know, but that was pretty funny, actually. So yeah, when you write about real world things, yeah, they can change on you if you go into the fantasy part of it.
Of course, if your reader doesn't know, no harm, no foul.
No, of course not. You know, they wouldn't know whether this building exists or it doesn't exist. You know, so it's sort of, yeah, you have a license to play around with things. Things don't have to be static. Well, that's what you do. You're using your imagination. So you've just got to go with it. Unfortunately, I have two small children that I'm coming up to a dinner time, and they will have to be fed. So, I mean, we've been talking for 2 hours, so maybe it's a good time to wrap things up, Richard, or?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry. I actually had a little bit of a technical difficulty.
Okay. You're back.
So, something went haywire with like every single one of my computers here. So something went nuts. I want to thank everybody under the show, and I'm glad we were able to, you know, put something together overnight between the two of them. I talked on my way to my daughter's recital, and then I, you know, spoke with you this morning, PJ, because I wanted to make going. The show is back on its normal schedule. Be continuing with next weekend. Next week is, and I think I have something Saturday morning, everyone. So I have to email everybody and let them know that authors next weekend, and I want to try to run it Friday night. And Authors Jam is the free-for-all. And everybody is welcome to join in. We have 8 signed up right now. As far as I know, the way I understand it, only 10 people can be in the YouTube Hangout at one given time. So people can come and go as they please. If they want to participate, Hangouts is full. You can just log on to the YouTube video. We're going to be maintaining the... I'm going to try my craziest to get a couple of the other authors involved that know a little bit more about the YouTube thing. Have some monitoring. But Authors Jam is basically a 10 author free for all. We're just going to have a ball and have a blast and talk shop.
What was the date on that?
It's going to be next Friday night is when I want to run it, because next Saturday my family has something during the day to scoot out and stuff like that. And it sounds like my girls are coming in here to tell me that they're about to leave.
What time will that be? Friday?
I'm hoping for 7 p.m. That's what I'm hoping. Everybody can do Eastern.
Yeah. 7 p.m.
And let's see, so far I have myself, Ashley Nestler, Steve Gata, Diane Gunn, KT Webb, Joe Compton, Diane, and Ani. joining us, and I'm hoping to get a couple more. Buddy can join. I mean, like I said, one way or another, some may come in and go out. It's going to be 2 hours, and then what we're going to do is re-air it again Saturday morning. Because we end up talking about, we're going to talk shop, talk books. We're going to get onto the subjects of genre, and then we'll get onto some subjects of writing tools, author tools to help authors out. Similar to what we had discussed a little bit earlier in the show. Dive into some of the excellent tools that are really out there, how to monetize your blog in a manner with stuff like Patreon, having subscriptions on Patreon, and some other good stuff like that. I'm really certain we're going to get into a lot of stuff with Joe. Anything can happen. And I believe next Saturday night is also Nerd Rage again.
Yes, it is.
It'll be Chrysler and the B2B group. Have a little bit of we have our own group called Nerd Rage. It's us nerds raging. It's funny because I'm usually my wife and a friend of mine, personal friend of mine that lives in Georgia now, tells me when I'm in my office, I'm geeking it out. So I guess I am a nerd. So, yeah.
Hey, we're taking over the world.
Over one book at a time. And
you mean it's not taken over yet?
No.
So I don't know. Bill Gates is the richest man in the world, so maybe.
Yeah, you have a point there.
Me on go ahead.
Are you going to be sending us the URL for the archived version of this chat?
The Hangout or the YouTube?
YouTube, I think.
Yeah, the YouTube.
Also, I can send you the YouTube video to share.
Okay.
Okay, that's great.
I can pass that along to both of you. And if you need a copy of the video or anything to add to your channel or something like that, guys, let me know. I'll download it and send it. I have no issues with that.
Okay, cool.
Okay, if you could, actually, if you don't mind me doing some things like putting little icons on it so it's distinct from yours. Okay.
No, I don't mind that at all. The more we get you guys out there, the more we get me out there. That's what Authors Write Aloud is all about.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Video is it's not. I'm not copywriting anything. Then I throw on my radio Saturday mornings. Just to write and talk about shop and stuff like that. So if you guys want to maintain and utilize the video in any way you feel you want to or need to, by all means, I can do that, supply a video for you, or set it up so that you can get a download link or something, download it, add icons, do what you want to do, and add it to your own channel. I have no issues with that. Please send me, put a little link in there, sends me to my channel or something, video or whatnot, something like that.
Thanks, Richard.
Thank you.
But I want to thank everybody for coming on.
Well, thank you.
You can find them, guys, and you can find me, authorrichardwhite.com. You can also find my books on Amazon. Pages Full of Memories is now revamped, brand new cover. It is absolutely beautiful. Here, I actually have a copy of the new cover, if I can get it to focus enough. I think there we go. They're sort of like that. It's white lettering, so it's really tough with the lighting to read the. There we go. But that's the new cover. I kind of revamped it a little bit, made it a little more appealing and a little more me. It's available on CreateSpace, Amazon, all the good stuff. You can also get the Kindle version, Kobo, and all that stuff online. I also have the Rodeo Days, my brand new book, What Happened to Me, my story of my own fight with PTSD from being overseas and being a firefighter and EMT. and also my new Western under my pen name Shotgun Bo Rivers. You can get Letters from the Grave, which is an awesome Western fiction book, historical fiction, that it is basically letters from the outlaws, or lawmen writing to their killer. So there's a letter in there from Billy the Kid to Pat Garrett. There's a letter in there from Wild Bill Hickok to Jack McCall. All sorts of good stuff. I really recommend it. If you're into a Western book and you want a fun, mysterious read, it's definitely worth it. You can find everything on authorrichardwhite.com. I have my brand new bookstore set up on the website over there, so you can access all of my titles. Thank everybody for coming on Authors Write Aloud. Until next week, check us out, like I said, for Authors Jam next week. And then Friday night, I believe we're going to go live at about 7 p.m.
Yeah,
thanks a lot, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us, Richard. Okay. See you, man.
Bye.
All right.